Our next presenter is Erin Tuttle. You heard her again this morning, and everybody's got a story, and Erin is no different. Her story is the Indiana story. Erin?
Well, I wish my story had a happy ending. Oh gosh. It's making me challenging. Okay. So I wish I had a happy ending to the Indiana story. It started out, really almost like a Cinderella story where the two, housewives get legislation passed to fight back against the huge, Common Core monster that seems to be devouring everybody in its sight, no means of escape. And, things were going fairly well. So we had two pieces of legislation. One was the pause bill. That was all we could politically get through at the time, was just to pause the implementation of Common Core, do this thorough evaluation of Indiana standards, our old standards, which were rated superior to the Common Core by the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, and anybody else with half a brain who could read standards would tell you Indiana's academic standards in math and English were superior to the Common Core, probably the top three in the country, next to Massachusetts, maybe California. So, big process to review everything. It was going to be handled through the Indiana Department of Education. They were going to kind of facilitate this rewrite of standards. So we then had another piece of legislation the next year during that review process that said Common Core is completely repealed. So, everybody's, yay, we got rid of Common Core, first state, in the nation to do so. And I liken that to being the first pancake that gets poured to test a griddle. Because you learn that maybe the conditions aren't right. So Indiana is kind of a burnt pancake. What wound up happening is that indeed there was this process to review the standards, and the entire time it went down, Heather Crossan, who is a co-founder of Hoosiers Against Common Core with me, she and I were just shocked by some of the just blatant rebrand on the way things that were going by unnoticed. So they come up with a set of standards, and if you're Governor Mike Pence, and you're out there claiming, that you have gotten rid of Common Core and you're going to have standards that are, and I quote, the highest in the nation, written by Hoosiers for Hoosiers. And you have made this promise, and you might be running for president, and you need to be fulfilling some promises, right? This is a big issue. So let's say that you are Mike Pence, and you have these standards before you, and you're supposed to approve them, through his position on the Indiana Roundtable, who recommends standards to the State Board of Ed. So you're Mike Pence, and your aide, or maybe the director of your education agency, Claire Fitty and Green, gives you some reports that your state has paid for. They said we're going to have national evaluators that we are going to hire to evaluate the standards as part of a, just an overall, opinion and to give direction on the standards. So here's one. It's from Dr. Terrence Moore. He wrote, if the new standards were turned in to me as a college professor, if the new standards were turned into me as a college paper, I'd give it an F and write plagiarism across the top. An utter disappointment, clearly written in a rush. James Milgram and Zev Worman write, the new Indiana standards are definitely our Common Core rebranded in K-8 grades. They do not prepare students for STEM-based college majors.
Just talk through it.
Okay, Sandra Stotts, he says, all I see are Common Core standards for the most part, or compression of them, and I see no knowledge requirements at all. Okay. Even those who support the Common Core, from Thomas B. Fordham Institute, Kathleen Porter McGee, I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, she writes, the Indiana academic standards for ELA bear a striking resemblance to the Common Core. In short, Indiana has inexplicably gutted the Common Core of its strongest elements, and there's only a few, but they did strike those. She continues to say, They have renamed what remains and moved forward swiftly with a campaign to secure adoption of this pale, skills-heavy, content-light, text-neutral document. I mean, I could go on and on. There were a few others. There was one that was positive from the National Evaluators from Michael Cohen, who's with the chief. Ironically, the chief has, written the standards and is very active, and he says, quote, very strong. You couldn't tell from the draft that they were rushed in doing this. It's a solid job. There's no doubt about that. So out of all of the comments, that's the only positive one, and it just so happens to come from the president of the chief. So, if you're a governor with half a brain, discount the last one. Let's look at people who aren't biased, who don't have a dog in the, a horse in the race, have a personal benefit from it, to really look at it and get an honest opinion. But oh no. When that was presented, when the standards were presented to the Indiana Education Roundtable, Mike Pence said, now I know there's some reports out there by some national experts, but you know what? I believe in teachers. And the teachers that were on these committees, I'm going to trust what they say, and I'm going to trust what they want to do. And so, I'm not really going to pay much attention to that. So you think, wow, these committees must be some really strong teachers, right? You probably are thinking, who are these teachers? Well, let me tell you. So our first kind of tip-off that said this standards review process, repealing Common Core and replacing it with another set of standards, has a predetermined result that they want. They want a result of Common Core standards under a new name to get parents off their back. They want to have standards that can create an assessment that will align with other college and career-ready assessments like PARC, Smart or Balance. When you heard Dr. Lessig talk about the data, that data's got to compare. So you can't have standards that generate an assessment that's much different, because you have to be able to compare the data between the different states. But back to the teachers on these committees. So during the legislation, you have your pro Common Core people come down to the State House and testify, and then you have those who are against it come down and testify. And so we get the names of the committees, and we're looking through it. And Heather and I are thinking, wait a second. I'm like, I think she testified against our bill. I think she's the teacher that said that she loved Common Core and nothing in this country could match it, and if it were, and to do anything but Common Core would be damaging to the children of our state. And she's on the committee. She's supposed to be some sort of neutral, evaluator of standards. So we looked through the list. Over 50% of the people on the committees had publicly supported the Common Core, either through testimony before our state legislature or through signing a petition that went around town. So essentially what the Indiana Department of Ed did in forming these groups is they went around and selected people that they already knew were on their side, right? They wanted to select people who would give them this known end result that they were trying to establish. So, and Governor Pence is aware of this. Heather and I are, sounding the alarm. And I went to a State Board of Ed meeting, and I got up and I spoke and I said just that. And one of the State Board of Ed members said, Erin, we didn't really want to hold that against people. We didn't think that was fair. To hold someone's prior opinion against them isn't fair, and we just didn't think that's necessary. And I said, okay. I said, well, one of the problems with Common Core is that there were no math professors, besides Jim Milgram, maybe a few others on the validation committee, but the majority of them were math educators. And so we said, whatever you do on these committees for high school, we have to make sure that they don't have a PhD in math education, that they actually have a PhD in mathematics. There is a difference. There is a very large difference. And that was one of the reasons that the Common Core high school math standards were so weak, is because they didn't have the expertise of someone who actually teaches mathematics courses at a high level at the college level. If someone has a PhD in math education, they teach teachers how to teach math. And some of them may have taken some advanced math skills. I'm not saying that it's not a valuable degree. I'm just saying it's very different from somebody who has a PhD in actual mathematics. If you ask them what they did their dissertations in, you'll see a big difference in the PhDs. Anyway, so in the State Board of Ed meeting, I said, I've also noticed you don't have any, anybody on the committee that has a PhD in mathematics. And the State Board of Ed member, same one, said, Erin, yes, we do. And he named a couple names. And I said, no, they're not. they have a PhD in math education. He said there's no difference. So you deal with, if you are in the state and you are trying to do, to repeal Common Core and to get good standards put into place, you have to realize that the people who are making the decisions to put all of these things together are generally not very informed, truly. And it's not their fault. It might not be their full-time job. They may just sit on the State Board of Ed. But what is their fault is not to listen to the truth when they're told the truth. And that's why it's your job as grassroots activists to write letters and do things so that people can become aware and can get more information. But when you ask the question, like, was federalism restored? Because that's what Mike Pence says. He didn't realize it was a content issue. We're not in Common Core, but we're still doing Common Core. We own our own standards now. I'm like, well, no, you just put your name on the Common Core. So he thought this federalism aspect of Common Core had been resolved, but it wasn't. So if you look at what Indiana did, we had just adopted new math standards in 2009. We adopted Common Core 2010. And if you see the difference, Mike Pence is running around the country, and I wish I had something good to say. I mean, I like Mike Pence for some things, but this policy issue, and he and I do not agree on. He's running around the country saying it was the most transparent process ever. The most thorough, most transparent process of writing standards of anywhere in this country, at least in the history of Indiana. Well, I mean, let's just look. 2009, what happened? We had. Oh, because it's on this computer. I know. Run over to my other computer. Okay. Was federalism restored? Okay, so 2009. So the draft one release before the vote. How long was the first draft out before they took a vote on the standards? It was a year. First draft to the vote, 2.5 months with the new Indiana College and Career Ready Standards, what they call them. How long was the public comment period? 3 months on the 2009, 3 weeks for the new Indiana standards. The final draft, so they had one draft, then they had subsequent drafts. The subsequent drafts were never available to the public to see. Just the first one, and then they kept it completely silent, no transparency whatsoever. And then right before the vote was scheduled, 3 business days over Easter weekend.
Yeah, right.
So people were supposed to digest, and remember, this is just math standards in 2009. This time it's math and English. It's twice the volume of things that people need to read through. So, and then the national evaluation time frame, 3 to 4 months before, 2 whole weeks. So, I mean, this was rushed beyond rushed. I mean, to say to the people of Indiana, here's your standards for math and English final draft, we're going to vote on them in 3 business days, and it's going to be over Easter weekend, so good luck. I mean, to me, that is so obviously, it's an obvious attempt to take away people's, time and the amount of thoroughness that they could put into something. It's certainly not fair. That's where. So these subsequent drafts, right? So there's first draft, and like I said, they didn't release anything to the public until the final draft. Well, the subsequent drafts were going on. And even the State Board of Ed members who were asking to see them, they were told no. You may not have them. And no one's asking like, what are you hiding? I guess the first question that would come out of my mouth is why the secrecy is for what? What are you not wanting people to see? They were not wanting people to see that it was a rebrand. Going through here. Okay, so at the very end, so the reports that Sandra did, James Milgram did, all these reports by these experts, you would imagine that they would have been given to, there was a separate committee, a smaller committee, they were called the College and Career Readiness Committee, and they were supposed to be the committee that said that the other committees had generated standards that were college and career ready. So they were like this little committee to say, yes, these standards are college and career ready. Well, one of the members asked to see the reports that the experts had done. They wanted to look through them, and they had not been given them. And so in a meeting, they said, well, at lunch, you can take a quick look at it over your 15-minute lunch break, but you can't keep them. So she's supposed to read hundreds, maybe even thousands of pages of paper between all the different experts, and she was not allowed to take them with her. So unless she had a photographic memory, to go like this and go through them, she wasn't able to digest that. And then finally, 3 business days before the vote, when the final draft was out, those reports were released. I mean, you know, when I hear most transparent process ever, you know, it makes me mad. And he just goes around saying it. So those are some of the comments that I read earlier. That one was kind of good, the Potemkin. You know, it's a Potemkin standards, you know, expectations, you know, built with a facade that impresses but very little enduring substance within the standards. So, you know, it is unfortunate because a lot of people work pretty hard on it, but to be honest, there are some, and Sandra's probably shocked to hear it, there are some, Governor Pence's office is trying to ask for how they can kind of correct it, how they can clean it up, what can be done. Now they're believing us. Now all of a sudden we aren't crazy. Now all of a sudden they may want to have some conversations with us, because what happens is when you rebrand Common Core, it's like the smell of smoke. Once you go, is that smoke? You know it right away. That's like Common Core. When you see it, you know right away. When your kid's in a Common Core classroom, you know it right away. So all these parents go back to school in the fall, hey, we got rid of Common Core, we're so glad. And my email and our website is just continually hit. Why are we doing this? Why aren't the teachers following the law? You know, I mean, it's turning into kind of a problem. And he can't say that he didn't do a rebrand. He does. Penn says it's not a rebrand. He says because they added a bunch of standards in math. Well, they just added back in the higher math classes we already had, like the pre-cal and trig. Nothing changed below, you know? So there's a lack of information that he has received from his people that is really, in a sense, made it sort of a liability when he talks about Common Core.
Erin, I just wanted to add that so far as the ELA writers were concerned, they were so poorly qualified, all the secondary teachers, so-called, for English. 3 of the 5 were administrators, they weren't even teachers, and I couldn't figure out how to get high school English teachers, an expanded committee to include more good high school English teachers in Indiana. But when you look at the job that came out, you had inept people working with paraphrases of poorly written standards. So what are you going to get? You're going to get something that's even worse than what was there to begin with, because how could they possibly paraphrase poorly written standards and make them better when they were so inept? And the 2 mathematicians, Wu and Milgram, both on different sides, both declared the math standards incoherent.
Right. I mean, so you're Pence, and you've got Milgram and Wu, both telling you incoherent.
The worst of all possible standards in the country.
They could be the worst possible standards in the entire country. And here's the joke. So they add in some of these upper level math classes like pre-cal, but guess what? The Common Core Algebra 1 and 2 don't have the foundations that you can take that class. And if you consider that the fact that they thought we needed Common Core because we had a high remediation rate, well, geez, let's give children less of the content that they need as prerequisite content to take a college level course. That's the solution. We'll give them less. And then when they get there, they'll do better. I mean, this is the kind of thought process that you have. It goes back to the AYP thing, the crazy decisions, the absolute just denial of reality. And, you know, it's hard to explain. But Sandra's right. And I think they chose the most inept people for those committees because they already knew what they wanted. You know, they hired a national facilitator to come in and run the whole thing. This Susie Shin was her name. She is affiliated with West Ed. I don't know if anybody here knows West Ed, but West Ed is helping to create Smarter Balance, which is a Common Core test. It is a joke. And we said, now you have, Governor Pence, you are claiming that this is a, Hoosier state, written by Hoosiers, for Hoosiers, restoring federalism, blah, blah, blah. And you hired Miss Susie Shin, a national person, to come in and facilitate the entire thing. So if you get dumb people to sit on a committee, that makes it much more likely that you can have a Susie Shin come in and facilitate it to deliver you this Common Core result so that the bigger picture, the bigger overarching intent of Common Core, which is really a nationalized education system, cradle to career, takeover. It's easier to get done. You have Sandra Stottsville in there, then you got some problems. So you can have burner reports, or at least hide them until the very last second. Okay, I'm out.